Welcome to Reframe, the podcast where we're redefining what's possible, one mindset shift at a time. I'm Jess, your guide on this journey to help you to rewrite your story and transform from the inside out. Let's dive into how small changes in the way you think can lead to big changes in the way you live. Welcome to episode, I want to say 8 of the podcast. It might actually be episode 9. I'm coming to you today from my youngest son's bedroom. I'm actually snuggled up in his bed under his dinosaur quilt because I just fancied being cozy, and this is where I took myself. So we had to take a bit of a break last week from the podcast because I had a really scary family emergency, which I won't get into, but we are all here, we are all safe, happy, and most importantly, healthy. But it did mean I wasn't able to record the podcast episode. But we were halfway through the Health Wheel mini-series where I talk about small 1% shifts that you can make in the 4 main areas of your health to improve your overall health. So these 4 main areas are your physical health, your financial health, your emotional health, and your relational health. So I've already done episodes on your physical health and financial, so please do check those out. And then I plan to do emotional next, but after said traumatic experience, I've really doubled down on my gratitude for my loved ones. So what better time than to do relational? So these are 1% shifts that you can make in your relationships to improve your relational health and therefore your overall health. Because when things are going well in your relationships, and when I say relationships, I mean romantic, I mean friendships, I mean family, your co-workers, any relationships that you have in your life, when things are going well in your relationships, it really just gives room for other areas of your health to thrive. I mentioned at the beginning of this mini series that each aspect of health really has a knock-on effect on the other. And that can be a positive knock-on effect, but it can also be a negative one. So relationships is an area of my life that I've struggled with for probably my whole life. And as I'm currently going through my own ADHD diagnosis, I'm understanding why so much more. And in fact, it's probably the area that I've had the most realizations in. And as a result, I've given myself the most grace in. And I observe more in real time, maybe my awkwardness, my lack of communication, my overwhelm, my fear of judgment, my fear of rejection. It's pretty wild. And things like my busy brain, getting distracted, other ways that my ADHD impacts me, they do impact me greatly, but I'd say that my own challenges with relationships are what have made romantic relationships such a huge challenge, as well as co-parenting, which right now is amazing because we've just developed a real deep level of self-awareness, but it wasn't always. Parenting, friendships, work, it's all been impacted by how I experience relationships. So it's the one that I'm really excited to be working on. I'm not going to say the most because financial was really exciting, physical health, emotional health. I'm loving making these 1% shifts in all areas of my health. But this is one that there's just something special about it. But it's also been incredibly triggering by working on it. So I'm being really kind to myself throughout this. And I hope that you will be too if listening to this episode or anything that you implement from this. If you feel like it triggers you, please be kind to yourself and please do reach out as well. My DMs are always open. So I'm going to touch on some areas that I'm working on that are improving my relationships in general. So none of these are specific to specific types of relationships, but hopefully you can use them to help you with romantic relationships, with your kids, with friendships. Okay, let's get started. So, number 1, and this is the first one, you'll notice a bit of a pattern here. It's been the first one for financial and for physical as well. It's looking at where you're at now. Where are you at with your relationships? And to do this, I of course have a journaling exercise. So for me, it's all about how relationships feel. not how they look. I believe the most important quality in a person is how they make you feel. And so, of course, I strive to lead with that when I'm working on my relationships. How do I want to make other people feel? But for each subgroup, so that could be your romantic partner, your kids, your siblings, friends, colleagues, etc. How do I feel in this relationship or in this group of relationships? And note anything that comes to mind, any fears, any conflict, any repetitive thoughts, any beliefs. And this is where you can go in and do the work. It also empowers you because you're taking the power back from the other person and you're putting it in your hands because you're noticing your triggers, your beliefs, your thoughts. Number 2, what do I want my relationships to be like? So you can see a general of where they're at now. And some of these relationships might be amazing. You might have the best friends ever and just the most incredible relationship with them. You might have the most incredible, loving, romantic relationship. You might be nailing it with mum life. And in which case, still go through this process because there are areas where you can nourish them more. Maybe it's like, actually, things are amazing. I just need to express gratitude more, or actually I've been thinking that I need to work on these areas of my life, but I actually don't. So I'm going to give myself some grace. I'm going to take that off my to-do list. But for the relationships that you find challenging or perhaps are non-existent, this is a really beautiful process to go through. So again, doing this for each subgroup, how do you want people to feel in your presence? This is such a beautiful journaling prompt to do. So for each group, start with friends. How do I want my friends to feel in my presence? But also, how do I want others to feel when they're about to be in my presence? And how do I want them to feel when they leave my presence? And then, how do I want to feel in those scenarios? How do you want to feel when you're with your friends? How do you want to feel when you're about to meet up with your friends? I know for me personally, and I don't get this as much now, but I used to get it so much, I would have the best time with my friends. I would absolutely love it. I loved being with my friends. Afterwards, I felt so amazing and I'd be like, oh, that was great. But before, I would feel so anxious. I would hope that people would cancel plans because it was overwhelming. And again, I'm going to mention this a little bit later on in the podcast, but as part of my ADHD, I really struggle with rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And that fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, this constant feeling that I'm being judged or criticized. And it meant that before meeting friends, I didn't feel good at all. But like I said, I loved it when I was with them. And afterwards, I would always have that feeling of, I can't believe I felt like that. It was amazing. So for me in that instance, I had amazing friends, an amazing time with them, but something that I could have potentially worked on was that feeling beforehand, soothing my nervous system, reframing any limiting beliefs I had around that. But also maybe putting some practical steps in place. Maybe letting a friend know that that was how I was feeling, or again, some kind of like regulatory act that I could do before. So that's a really, really beautiful journaling exercise that you can do. And once you've kind of got an idea or an overview of your relationship, so where you're at with them now, where you want them to be, there's so much you can do in terms of healing, mindset work, actionable steps to improve those relationships or just to nourish and nurture them. But here are some more tips that I found are just really helping me at the moment. So number 3 is a mindset shift, and it's understanding that nothing is personal. So how someone responds to you, their desires, their communication, it's about them, just like yours is about you. How you respond to someone is less about them and more about you and how you are feeling. Yes, it might be a directly related to something they've done, something they've said, but it's about you and how you are feeling, how you have perceived it. So if you find relationships strained, because of perhaps others' communications, actions, etc. Shifting to that mindset is really powerful, and it cuts overthinking and it gives people grace. So it's a really lovely thing to do in the moment. If you feel triggered, to just say that, okay, well, that's about them, their response, their actions, it's about them, it's not about me. And it not only shifts how you view them, but it also can really shift how you view yourself as well. Number 4, come back to love. So my therapist actually told me this one, and I love it. Anytime that I feel triggered, this is mainly used with my kids, I come back to love. And this obviously only works if you love the person. But if it's like a colleague, someone that's in your life, but you perhaps don't love them, then a good one is just remembering we're all just humans. We were all tiny babies, innocent little children. This is our first time on this planet in this life. And when you have that mindset shift, it really helps to give you grace. And I find that I can just stop the noise and that filter of expectations. I can really cut those expectations and just see everyone for this like beautiful soul that they are. And in fact, I'm going to make that a separate tip, cutting expectations. So number 5, cutting expectations. Yes, we need human decency. It's beautiful when someone sticks to their word and honors your boundaries. But when we see people for who they are, not who we expect them to be, not how we expect them to act, and not seeing them through the lens of how we would be, how we would respond. And I can put my hand up and say that I have done that so much in the past, but I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have said that. I would have done this. That's fine, but I'm not them. They're not me. And again, when you can just shift that perspective, but also take that tangible step to cut those expectations, it's honestly like that feeling when you drop your shoulders and just exhale. It really releases the pressure, because when you are holding on to expectations of others, like we can't control how other people act, how they will respond. So when you have expectations of how someone else will, you're more likely for those expectations not to be met. Whereas when we can just expect that someone will act how they will act, they are human, they will just be who they will be. And we can, again, with the other mindset shift, approach that with love and understand that nothing is personal, like combining these mindset shifts, you're just welcoming so much more ease into your life. Number 6, for those that you're close to, definitely don't want to be doing this to everyone in your life. Get to know their love language. And I don't mean this in an over-the-top kind of way, because, life's and we have enough to do without having a big job of trying to understand everyone in our lives' love languages. But just observing the people closest to you. Does that person prefer quality time? But yet maybe you're trying to shower them with gifts and then wondering why they don't really seem that receptive. Are they giving you physical touch when you want words? Understanding this, not only in others, but understanding it from yourself as well, makes relationships so much stronger. And even like for your kids, understanding what's their love language. If they are feeling overstimulated from school or upset because of a friendship problem, or, they've asked if they can have the sweets and you've said no because it's really close to dinner time, and they're upset and you want to have a connection with them. I know that one of my kids would just like quality time. He would just like to sit side by side and watch a TV program together, just being there together. Like, I'm not on my phone, I'm not working, I'm spending quality time with him. My other child would want a hug. He's a physical touch kind of kid. And not always. Sometimes he wants me to be interested in his Lego. And sometimes my other child wants me to just listen, or maybe praise him with words. But really getting to know, what is their love language? What do they prefer? And also in what scenarios? Sometimes if it's a friendship trouble, they might just want your words. Sometimes if they're feeling poorly, it might be physical touch. So these are really, really great to know, not only theirs, but to know yours as well, because then you can express your needs better. You're much more likely to get your needs met in a relationship, whether that be friendship, romantic, kids, work, whatever, when you express it, because we don't know what we know until we know it. I think that's the phrase. And especially when we are coming from a place of our own experiences and our own perspective. So if your love language is gifts, you're going to assume that other people's love languages are gifts. You're also going to assume that they're going to know that you want gifts. So really being open, and it's a really great conversation starter as well. What's your love language? How do you like to receive love? How do you like to express love? It also gives grace for when someone shows love in perhaps not the way that you want to receive it. Okay, so number 7, seeing the good in others and assuming that they see it in you. In fact, assuming they see it in you has been huge for me. I spent basically my whole life believing that I was a shitty person. I assumed that I was always being judged, that my human mistakes were so much worse than anyone else's. And it was a lot to do with my rejection sensitivity, dysphoria. But the more that I'm understanding that it's safe to be me, it's safe to be human, it's safe to not be perfect, and that others see my light because I am a good person, it's really helping how I interact with others, because I'm not interacting from a place of being scared that I'll make a mistake, that I believing that I need to impress others, that I need to be perfect, that I can't be me. And let me tell you, if you've never experienced that, it is exhausting. So if you are listening to this and thinking, oh my God, that's me, start assuming that others see the good in you. Because I see the good in others all the time. If someone else's house is messy, if they make a mistake, they're human. But if it was me, I would be so much more critical. I would be assuming that everyone was judging me and that I had to make up for it by being overly a good person. But actually, just assuming that everyone sees your light, everyone sees you as a good person. That's been a really powerful one for me. And like I said, it might not be relevant to everyone. Number 8, working on your own self-love. Because the times that I'm really triggered by those around me, it's usually because I'm not okay. And of course, there are occasions when others are just not being nice, in which case, boundaries. And that's the next point. But most of the time, it's because I have an unmet need. Am I overstimulated? Am I tired? Am I hungry? Am I not feeling fulfilled in my own life? Am I out of alignment? So in those situations, asking myself, how can I nourish myself? Firstly, for myself, but also so I can show up for others in the most amazing way. When we take care of ourselves, when we have that self-awareness and we notice, oh, I'm getting a little bit hungry or a little bit hangry, I'm really feeling unfulfilled in my job, I'm tired, I'm not getting enough sleep. When we can recognize those and work on meeting our own needs, that really helps to improve our relationships. So on to number 9, boundaries. And this goes back to your overall vision. How do you want to be treated in a relationship? How do you want to show up in a relationship? And base this on how you already are. So setting standards and raising the ones that aren't already working. But it's also really great to set practical boundaries. So with others, this could look like not feeling the need to reply to voice notes instantly or always answering the phone, and instead setting time to do this. I personally get really overwhelmed during the day, And so I found listening to and replying to voice notes when I'm on the way to pick up the boys from school or during my dog walks really helps. And also calling people back once the boys are in bed. And when that has become my routine or my boundary, it really takes the pressure off needing to respond instantly. And then what's associated with that is that fear of, well, if I don't respond, I'm a shit person. Whereas when someone else doesn't respond to me for a while, I don't care. It's fine. I'm also setting boundaries with yourself. So this may look like not answering the phone when you're supposed to be doing something that you told yourself that you do, despite feeling like you need to people please and you can't let anyone down. But it also could look like answering the phone when you're doing something, but really you need a good chat, because on this occasion, that work can wait. That admin task can wait. So every year I used to set myself the intention to be better at replying to people, because 99% of my messages or voice notes started with, I'm so sorry for the delay, and then a barrage of excuses. But now this seems to work for me. I'm not great at replying to everyone instantly, and that's okay. Like lives. I'm a single mum of 2 kids and a dog, and I run multiple businesses. And even if I didn't have or do any of those things, we don't need to be instantly available. And this is something that I do have to remind myself quite often. Like, back before mobile phones, none of us would have been instantly available. You'd wait for communication. So I set realistic communication boundaries now, and I'm so much more likely to feel successful and like I'm actually on top of or just keeping up with my communication, and therefore to reduce that negative self-image of, I'm a rubbish friend, I'm so rubbish at replying, why can everyone else reply and I can't, when that's not even the case. These could also be boundaries in terms of not overcommitting or committing to things. Again, it really depends on where you're at now and where you want to be. But I know for me, I used to get FOMO or not always FOMO. So it wasn't always a fear of missing out. It was more often a fear of letting people down, or what could it be? I feel like this is like a real time deep dive for me. Maybe wanting to keep up with others who were able to be readily available. So not necessarily a fear of missing out, but I wanted, well, if they can meet up for lunch, I want that. I want to have that time freedom perhaps, or to have the emotional and the energetic capacity to be able to do it all, when in reality, none of us are doing it all. But I used to say yes to every meetup, but then my work would suffer. So to allow for more balance in my life, now I will allow myself maybe like one friendship meetup during the week, or a dog walk with friends during the week, maybe one meal out with friends a month kind of thing. I'm not strict with that at all, but I know that if I say I'm going to just say yes to one thing this week, I might not get asked to do anything that week, and that's absolutely fine. But I also know that if I'm asked to do a few things, because that's my boundary and I'm really okay with that boundary, I don't then feel bad about it. I don't feel bad about saying no. I can just say, oh, actually, I'm not free. How about the next week? And that's okay. And of course, there are boundaries with how others speak to you, how they treat you, and vice versa. There's a quote that I love, and it's, the hardest conversation is the one that you should have had 3 conversations ago. Because when we don't speak up in the moment, like setting boundaries, it feels hard, especially if you're a people pleaser. But if you don't do it in the beginning, it's just going to get harder and harder to do. But the right people in our lives will see that, firstly, how brave it is of you to be vulnerable, but also they'll hopefully appreciate it, that vulnerability and honesty, and the fact that you want to improve the relationship rather than just cutting someone out. You're saying, with love, I don't appreciate when you speak to me like that, or I'd prefer it if you did this. And they will hopefully want to honour your boundaries to maintain that relationship. So boundaries is a big one. I feel like we could do a whole podcast episode, probably a whole podcast series on boundaries. But I guess the main point from that is just to look at your overall vision of where your relationships are, where you want them to be, and what boundaries you could implement to help you to get to where you want to be in those relationships. And then number 10, I always think, as morbid as this may be, how do I want to be remembered? Do I want my gravestone to say, her house was so tidy, she earned so much money? Or do I want it to be, she was always there for me, or she was a warm hug, she was a great listener, she was so fun, she was so kind? My biggest goal in life is to have good times with good people, to love my life with my loved ones. So coming back to that vision is such a beautiful anchor for me, which is helping me in my relationships to make them 1% better each day. I want to be remembered for how I make people feel. That's the important thing. Not how many times I said yes to them, not for all the boundaries that I let people overstep, not for how quickly I replied or didn't reply. Okay, if you really bring it back to the quality of the relationships, the feeling, the energy in the relationships, none of the other things matter. So I guess an overall kind of biggest point of this is the mindset shift of you don't have to perform. You don't have to impress. You want to create relationships where you can be yourself, where you can feel safe, loved, heard, seen, and in exchange, how you show up in the relationship can enable the other person in the relationship to feel the same. And if that means setting boundaries with yourself, setting boundaries with them in order for that to work, then it is so worth investing your time into doing that. So I hope you loved this episode. Of course, please do send me a message and let me know any of your takeaways. I've had some really wonderful feedback from the financial and physical health episodes. Of you guys really implementing beautiful shifts in your lives, which is just amazing. So please do keep letting me know. And if you loved this episode, if you found it useful, please do leave it a 5-star review. That would be so amazing. And I will see you on the next episode.